I'm definitely going to have to put he came and took her by the hand first. That's from Mark. And he came and took her by the hand and lifted her up. Okay, because, yeah, when she's laying down as he's pulling her up, if it's as I was saying, lifting her up, she's in the process of being healed, that means that right when she starts, she's still 0% healed. So lifted her up could be the beginning of it starts immediately the fever left her. Or I could put and lifted her up and immediately the fever left her from Mark, and then from Luke, and it left her and immediately she arose. No, I can't put both. And it left her. So he rebuked the fever. Before I continue with Luke, right after he rebuked the fever saying it left her, I'm going to start with saying that he lifted her up, or he began lifting her up. So Mark, and lifted her up, and immediately the fever left her. Okay, I have to put in the phrase, and it left her. I'll put and it left her in between he came and took her by the hand, and lifted her up. That would be he took her by the hand, it left her, and he lifted her up. That's what I'll do. The way I have it like this, he stood over her and rebuked the fever from Luke, then from Mark, he came and took her by the hand, then back to Luke, and it left her. It's as if it's saying, when he rebuked the fever, nothing happened until he also took her by the hand. So maybe I should put and he from Luke and Mark, then say from Luke stood over her, from Mark and took her by the hand, then from Luke and rebuked the fever and it left her, and then have and lifted her up. Yeah, that's what I'll do. So now it reads, and he stood over her, came and took her by the hand, and rebuked the fever and it left her, and lifted her up. There's a lot of semicolons in here. And rebuked the fever and it left her, and lifted her up. It sure seems like the fever left her and then she got up. Maybe I should put came and took her by the hand and rebuked the fever and lifted her up first from Mark, and then say and it left her. So it'd be like an act of faith, her getting up, and through her act of faith, her getting up, or as her act of faith took place. Yeah, I like that. Through her action of walking out her belief and obeying, that is when she was healed. And at the end is when it fully left her. That's what I'll do. Oh, you know what? These words came and should come before stood over her. That way it says, and he came and stood over her, comma, took her by the hand, comma, and rebuked the fever. Oh, that's perfect. Yeah. And I'm not reorganizing anything. I'm just switching earlier in the sentence. Took her by the hand and rebuked the fever, and lifted her up, and it left her. That's perfect. That is perfect. It's all in order. Should I put, and immediately she arose? Lifted her up, and it left her. And immediately she arose, and it left her. Lifted her up and arose is the same thing. I already said that from Mark. It lifted her up, and it left her. Should I say both? And lifted her up, and it left her, and immediately she arose and ministered to them? No, I don't want to put it twice, because that would be a repeat. So I'll just have lifted her up as the one time that she got up, and from both, she from Mark, ministered to them from both. Okay. I could put, and immediately she ministered to them, showing that she was totally healed right away. You know what? I don't even have the word immediately in there, as it is. I'm going to put, and immediately before it left her. That's what I'm going to do. Lifted her up, and from both, immediately from Mark. And immediately the fever left her. Actually, I'm going to say the fever left her. He rebuked the fever and lifted her up, and immediately the fever left her, not just it left her. So I'll say the fever left her from Mark. From Luke it says the fever and it left her. So I'll say immediately the fever is only in Mark and left her is both. Left her, comma, in Mark, and she ministered to them, and it left her, colon, and she arose. I am done with all these semicolons and colons, so I'm just going to have the comma from Mark. And he arose, and forthwith, when they were come out of the synagogue, they entered into the house of Simon and Andrew, with James and John. But Simon's wife's mother lay sick with a great fever, and anon they besought him for her. And he came and stood over her, took her by the hand, and rebuked the fever, and lifted her up, and immediately the fever left her, and she ministered to them. That sounds perfect. I didn't read ahead. I have read Matthew many times before. I just didn't remember. In Matthew 8, after his Sermon on the Mount, it also has the account of Jesus going into Peter's house and healing Peter's wife's mother. Yeah, Matthew is pretty out of order. So just verse 14 and 15 from Matthew 8. 14 begins with, "And when Jesus was come into Peter's house," what I have says, "And he arose, and forthwith, when they were come out of the synagogue, they entered into the house of Simon." So I could say the second "and" is also from Matthew, and the "when" part of that sentence as well. Now, instead of just having Jesus from Matthew, it says, as I have it from Mark, when they were come out of the synagogue, they entered in the house of Simon. The "they" includes Jesus, but it also has Simon, Andrew, James, and John. And I don't want to just exchange all of them for Jesus, because Jesus is included in "they," so I'm going to leave "they" as it is. And instead of just Jesus was, it has to be "they were," so I'm skipping "was" as well. The word "come" is in Matthew as well. Into Peter's house. They entered into... This only says Peter's house. It doesn't say Simon at all. I could put Simon Peter's and Andrew, or the house of Simon Peter. I can't put Andrew's apostrophe S as well as Peter apostrophe S. I have to leave it as the house of Simon. I don't want to just say Peter and leave off that apostrophe S. House is definitely there. He saw his wife's mother, Simon's wife's mother, lay sick with great fever, and they besought. Okay, so wife's mother is in Matthew. Laid as a part to lay sick. I think lay sick is way better than laid and sick, but I'll put sick as also from Matthew. Of, okay, I remember I chose with instead of because there were only two options, with and of. But since of is also here in Matthew, I am inclined to go back to that because that's 2-to-1. Of instead of with. Yeah, I'll go with that. I'll go with of instead of with, even though I like it more that it's with, but of is there twice and with is only there once, so I'll say of, it'll be Matthew and Mark. A, great is not here, just fever. And he touched her hand, and anon they besought him for her, and he came and stood over her and took her by the hand. And he, okay, this "and he" is also in Matthew. Came and stood over her, took her by the hand, as opposed to touched her hand. So, should I say touched her hand or took her by the hand? I'm going to leave it as took her by the hand because he also lifted her up, as recorded in Mark. It's left out in Matthew, but you're not going to take her up just by touching someone's hand. You're going to take them by the hand and lift them up. So I'll leave took her by the hand. I'll say her and hand. And okay, the comma is also in Matthew. This is Matthew and Mark, which means it's dark red. That's right, because it's not in Luke. Took her by the hand, and the fever left her. This "and" is going to be all three. The fever left her. Immediately the fever left her. So the fever is Matthew, Mark, and left her is all three. And she arose. Oh, look at that. She arose. That's now a double witness as opposed to lifted her up. I think I might want to leave lifted her up though, because lifted her up implies not only that she got up, but that she was lifted. However, saying she arose is just that. It could be that it was all by herself. But saying Jesus lifted her up is saying both. He helped her up and she got up. So I'm going to leave it at that. And lifted her up because it's more descriptive. And she, and is all three. She is Matthew, Mark. And she arose and ministered to them as all three. Good.